Ever get those shopping butterflies? You know, that thrill of the find, or maybe the dread of the dressing room?
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're diving deep into all those emotional currents that kind of pull us through every store aisle and website banner.
I like it.
Our source.
Okay.
Just a casual chat between two friends, Jake and Emily, on their podcast, Learn with Podcast.
Uh-huh.
They get into their own, relatable shopping habits, and we're here to sift out some insights.
Cool. I'm ready.
So whether you're a hardcore bargain hunter or the add to cart and wait a week kind of person, get ready for some, oh, that's so me moments as we unpack the psychology behind, all our retail adventures.
I'm intrigued.
Now, both Jake and Emily talked about the thrill of the hunt, that almost, addictive feeling of finding the perfect item.
Yeah.
It reminded me of how Emily was over the moon about finding that winter coat after weeks of searching. What is going on in our brains when we finally track down that perfect item?
Well, it's like our brains are almost hardwired for that shopping high, like that anticipation as you browse, the mental checklist you run through, and then bam, you find it.
Yeah.
Your brain releases this surge of dopamine, which is that feel-good chemical, basically saying, yes, you did it.
Right.
And that satisfying feeling makes us want to repeat the experience again and again.
So it's not even just about the code itself, it's the victory of the search.
Exactly. And that's something retailers totally understand. They leverage that dopamine rush. Think about carefully orchestrated product displays, limited time offers. It's like the whole experience is designed to tap into those reward circuits and keep us coming back for more.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, but then how do we explain those times when shopping goes totally south?
Oh, tell me about it.
I'm thinking about Emily's disastrous birthday gift hunt. It sounded like a real roller coaster of stress.
Oh.
We've all been there. But why is it that sometimes instead of this fun outing, shopping feels like navigating a minefield of stress?
Well, imagine your brain on shopping overload.
Okay.
Every decision, from picking the right size to choosing between seemingly endless options, it all takes mental energy. And eventually you hit what we call decision fatigue. It's like your brain just throws its hands up and says, enough already.
Oh, tell me about it. I feel that in the grocery store, and it's supposed to be, simple there.
Right, and it's not just the decisions themselves. Physical stores can be a lot.
Yeah.
Think about it. Bright lights, the music, the crowds, it all adds up to sensory overload, making it so much harder to think clearly and actually enjoy the experience.
And don't even get me started on the online shopping trap of expectation versus reality.
Oh yeah, the worst.
The color is off, the fit is weird, and suddenly returning something is a whole other ordeal.
It's like the online shopping hangover. We build up this mental image based on carefully curated photos and descriptions.
Yeah.
And when the reality doesn't match up,
Yeah.
it's a total letdown. We're left feeling disappointed, frustrated, maybe even a little foolish for, falling for the hype.
Speaking of falling for the hype, what about the wild world of bargain hunting? Jake's Black Friday laptop story comes to mind.
Oh yeah.
That adrenaline rush, the fear of missing out, it's almost like a sport.
It absolutely is. Limited time offers and the concept of scarcity. They're not just marketing tactics, they're tapping into our primal instincts. The idea that something might run out creates this sense of urgency and competition, making us way more likely to make impulsive decisions.
So is that how they get us to buy that air fryer we never knew we needed?
You hit the nail on the head. Those limited time sales,
Yeah.
they trigger this fear of missing out. We're wired to respond to scarcity, even if that scarcity is, artificially created.
Fascinating. It's like our brains are playing this high-stakes game with all these marketing ploys, but then are we really winning when we snag that amazing deal? Or are we, tricking ourselves into thinking that we are?
That's the question, isn't it? Because sometimes that thrill of the bargain can lead to those impulse buys, things we didn't even really need or even want in the first place.
Yeah, it's like we're wired to chase that deal, even if it ends up costing us more in the long run, right?
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be mindful of those emotional triggers. If we can pause, recognize that I gotta have it, feeling is being amplified by those external pressures, then we can start to make more rational decisions.
It's like we have to outsmart our own brains
A
sometimes.
little bit, yeah.
That reminds me of Jake's smartwatch story. Remember, he's so excited when he first bought it, but then that buyer's remorse set in.
Oh, yeah.
So is that another example of these shopping emotions at play?
It's the classic case of want versus need. And, marketing and advertising, they just love to blur those lines. They make us think we need something, when really it's just, a fleeting desire.
So how do we start to separate those wants from needs? Both Jake and Emily mentioned budgeting. It seems like a good place to start.
Definitely. Having a budget, even if it's a loose one, it just gives us like some parameters, right? It helps us make more intentional choices about where our money goes instead of just getting like swept up in the moment.
Yeah, and it probably makes it easier to resist those impulse purchases too.
For sure. If you know you have, say, $100 allocated for clothes shopping that month, you're probably going to be less likely to blow it all on those flashy shoes you saw that you don't even really need.
Makes sense. Setting those boundaries and sticking to them. They also talked about delayed gratification. Is that just a fancy way of saying sleep on it?
Pretty much, yeah. But it's more than just a good night's sleep, right? It's about giving ourselves that time to, really evaluate the purchase. Do you still want it a day later, a week later? Delaying the gratification allows the initial, excitement to subside so we can make a more level-headed decision.
That takes discipline, though. It's so easy to get caught up in the moment, especially with online shopping. One click and it's yours.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill that takes practice. But think about it this way. Delaying gratification isn't about, denying yourself. It's about making sure that purchase is truly something you value and that you're going to actually use and enjoy long term. And that brings us back to aligning our spending with our values.
Right. Okay, I'm sensing a theme here. It seems like a lot of this just comes down to self-awareness.
Totally. Paying attention to our emotions throughout that shopping experience. Recognizing those triggers, developing strategies to make more conscious choices. It's a journey, not a destination.
And speaking of journeys, let's talk about the social side of shopping. Sometimes going with friends is the best part, but other times it feels like a recipe for disaster. Why is that?
Well, it all comes down to, social dynamics and how they influence our behavior. Humans are wired for connection, for belonging, and that desire to fit in can totally impact our shopping habits.
Right. Emily loved getting her friends' opinions, but Jake seemed a little more hesitant about the social pressure.
That's such an important distinction. Because for some, shopping with friends, it's all about the fun, the shared experience, getting advice and validation. But for others, it can trigger those feelings of comparison, competition, maybe even pressure to spend beyond their means.
It's like we need to be mindful of who we're shopping with. Do they bring out our inner bargain hunter, or do they encourage us to splurge?
Exactly. Do they encourage us to stick to a budget, or do we tend to overspend when we're with them? It's worth paying attention to.
It's like a shopping buddy system, but for our wallets.
I like that. And just like any good buddy system, it's about having that accountability and support to make, smart choices.
This has been really eye-opening. I mean, we've gone from the thrill of the find to the science of scarcity and even the social pressure of retail therapy. What's the one big takeaway you hope our listener walks away with today?
Well, shopping is often seen as this purely transactional experience, right? But it's so much more than that. It's a reflection of our values, our aspirations, even our anxieties. And by, actually taking the time to understand the psychology behind those shopping impulses, well, we can start to make more intentional choices that actually align with who we are and what we truly value.
So it's not about swearing off shopping altogether. It's about being smarter shoppers.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, where we can still enjoy the experience, treat ourselves occasionally, but we can try to avoid those common traps that lead to, overspending and buyer's remorse.
That's a balance I think we could all strive for.
Yeah.
Any final tips for navigating that emotional roller coaster of, what do they call it, retail therapy?
I'd say this. The next time you find yourself reaching for your wallet, just take a moment to pause and check in with yourself. What's driving this purchase? Is this a genuine need, or is this a fleeting want? And how will you feel about it tomorrow, next week? That little pause can make a world of difference.
Such a good point. Sometimes the most powerful tool we have is that pause button.
Absolutely. It allows us to step back, assess the situation, and make choices that actually serve us in the long run.
And on that note, it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the emotional world of shopping.
Yes. Remember, shopping can be both enjoyable and, sometimes a little stressful. But by understanding the why behind our reactions, we can approach it with more intention, more awareness, and ultimately more satisfaction.
So next time you hit the shops, whether it's online or in person, keep those insights handy. And may all your purchases be wise ones.